Hello everybody and welcome back to the Stretford Paddock. My name is Omar and I'm going to be joined again by Ryan. Ryan, how are you today?
How are we doing?
I'm not too bad, I'm not too bad. So we've just heard Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Well, we haven't just heard, it was quite a while ago now. But we've just heard Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's recent press conference. What is that? Okay.
Technical issues
there. Just a reminder before we kick off this video, be sure to get your comments in and we will talk about your comments in the video. So we'll start off with Alexis Sanchez, and Ollie touched upon the recent speculation really with the player, and he confirmed he played a closed doors game, didn't he, Ryan?
Sheffield, I think it was.
I think it was against Sheffield, yeah. And the BBC, I think, reported that talks were stalled because of Sanchez's high wage demands, that they couldn't reach an agreement. But Ollie has come out and said that there are still talks with some clubs, but he played in that game and he played well. As I've said, he is working well. Let's see in September what is going to happen. Ryan, I mean, with Alexis Sanchez, he seems not unfit. I mean, he seems like he's surplus to requirements. Yeah. But because our transfer window is shut, it seems kind of silly, really, to get rid of a player like him without replacing. I know there's been talk of Fernando Llorente, but what's your opinions on potentially getting rid of Alexis Sanchez?
Well, you just said then that he's surplus to requirements. If he'd have had a better window, I'd completely agree with you. But with the likes of Lukaku going and our forward line looking very short in numbers in terms of just it being Rashford, Martial and Greenwood, I think it'd be a bit daft to let Sanchez go now.
So we talk about the potential replacements, and Fernando Llorente, I think he cropped up in an article. I think it was an Italian article. I think it was something like, it was either Gazzetta or Corriere dello Sport, and they claimed that United had offered Fernando Llorente a 2-year deal. What are your thoughts on this? Because we saw what his performances were like at Tottenham Hotspur, and he wasn't the first choice striker really, because he was in the shadow of Harry Kane. Yeah. If Fernando Llorente came, what would you see that signing be like? I wouldn't
mind it, because it's not like he's going to be starting week in, week out.
It'd be a bit of a different option, wouldn't it?
But I think we need that though, because I think with Lukaku going, we lose that option of a direct ball. Now, I mean, he wasn't necessarily fantastic at holding the ball up anyway, Lukaku. Yeah. But I feel like Llorente is a lot better at that. If you play the ball into him, he can hold it up a lot better. And his wages are going to be a fraction of what Sanchez was on, so it's not like he's coming in for the same.
So do you think then he could potentially create maybe a harmony with the squad in terms, because you talk about the low wages, and there's been massive rumours about the unrest in the squad really, because Alexis Sanchez set the bar so high, and because he was performing so low, many players really wanted higher wages, didn't they? So do you think, taking that into consideration, we need to get rid of Sanchez?
Like I said at the start of the video, at the start of the summer, I was looking forward to getting rid of him. I don't feel like he's that keen on him anyway. Yeah. But yes, the wages are a problem, but you've got to look at it in the sense that if he goes and we have one injury to either Martial or Rashford, then we are super light up front. Or
do you think if Llorente came in, maybe he'd kind of stop the progress of Mason Greenwood? Do you think that could be an issue?
No, not necessarily. I feel like Greenwood's still going to get a lot of minutes. I think people forget how many games we've actually got this season, 100%. Especially if we go far in the Europa League, which I think he's looking to do. Yeah. Obviously, you've got the FA Cup, the League Cup as well, so if you can get a decent run in that. So the likes of Greenwood, Chong, Gomez, they're going to get plenty of games, so I don't think it's a case of halting their progression, Greenwood in this instance. But I think, like I say, I think it'd just give us a different option up there, because Rashford, Martial, Greenwood, they are quite similar, and I think it's just good to have, so you're not very one-dimensional in what you do. So if we're coming up against an opposition that is struggling to cope with a commanding big striker, then Llorente is your man if he was to come in.
So we talk about the striker situation, and it will be interesting to see, as I said, what happens with Alexis Sanchez. Get your comments in and let us know what you think about the situation, because it is an interesting one, and hopefully it will be resolved within the next week. Now, moving on to the Paul Pogba situation, and Paul Pogba has been kind of a lot in the news, really, hasn't he, Ryan, with not just the penalty miss, but obviously he's been subject to a lot of racism. And Ollie touched upon this as well, because we've seen with Ollie, he likes to back his players, he likes to defend his players, kind of traditional of what Ferguson used to do, wasn't it? And he came out and said, Paul is fine, he's a strong character and it makes him stronger. I cannot believe we still sit here in 2019 talking about these instances. The authorities have got to do something about the ones who spread this hate. You feel sorry for them, really. They must have problems themselves. Ryan, what is your take on all this racism? Because we all understand that it's unacceptable in society.
100%.
What do you think needs to be done to kind of clamp down on the issues of racism in social media?
I'm not really sure what can be done, to be honest with you, mate. I mean, always summed it up there. It was 2019 and we're still having to talk about people being victimised for the colour of the skin. It's ridiculous, and social media is obviously a big problem for it.
And it's kind of funny, isn't it? Because if Paul Pogba scored that penalty, we probably wouldn't hear any of this, would we? So it's a bit silly, but obviously I think we've all touched upon it before. You've seen it out there in the press as well. The racism and some of the stuff that's gone towards him is absolutely ridiculous, and all of us here condemn it, don't we?
I think it's one of them. You're never going to get rid of it, as bad as it is, and as much as people want to clamp down on it as much as possible. It's still always going to exist, and it's just one of them things that's never going to go away. The only thing that we can do as a society, and these people with platforms like Twitter and people like that, they need to try and take as much precaution as they can. I think Maguire put a tweet out, didn't he, saying
came out and defended Pogba, didn't he?
Passport
something like
which
that.
I get, but you are taking it up.
OTT, isn't it?
But I'd like to say it's there, it exists. You're never going to get away from it, but it does need to, because it's got, for the last 5 years, it's been horrendous. Yeah. Not just for United, but obviously you saw it with Tammy Abraham the other week as well.
So Pogba, that was one of the reasons why Paul Pogba was in the news. The other reason why Paul Pogba was in the news was because of the penalty taking. And there's been a lot of debate. It was mainly sparked by the Sky Sports panel, wasn't it, with Gary Neville. Some might say it was a bit of an overreaction. Some might agree. But Ollie touched upon the penalty situation. He said, I'm sure you're going to see Paul Pogba score a penalty again for Manchester United. Let's see when we get the next one. We're practicing penalties still. Marcus and Paul are still on them. Don't be surprised if Marcus or Paul scores the next one. I'm sure they will. There's absolutely no fighting amongst them. We're disappointed that we didn't win the game, but the talk is always much more difficult when you don't get a result. Ryan, do you think then that there should be a set penalty taker? Because Ollie seems to have come out and backed his players, as we've seen previously from Ollie press conferences before. There's been a lot of talk about there being a set penalty taker. I mean, do you think there should be one penalty taker, or do you like the system that we've got at the moment?
Obviously, Pogba did come up for a lot of stick after his penalty miss, and I wasn't necessarily that mad at Pogba. It was more the system, after it was explained after the match, that they decide on the pitch who takes it. I mean, having two designated ones is fine, because I think he said it in the press conference as well, that if Marcus is having a bad game and doesn't feel confident enough to take it, then Paul's going to step up and take it, and vice versa, which to that point I get. But I mean, Rashford's not missed a pen in his career.
So we Ryan nicely builds up into that. So we've got a few stats to throw at you, and it was about our penalty takers, between Paul Pogba, Marcus Rashford and Anthony Martial. And we looked at their penalty stats, and Rashford has a 100% scoring record, doesn't he? Yeah. He's taken 6 and he's scored 6. Pogba has taken 18, scored 13 and missed 5, which isn't as bad on paper as people might assume. And then you've got Anthony Martial, who's taken 10, scored 8 and missed 2. So judging by those stats, right?
Their complete career, by the way.
Complete career, yeah. So judging by those stats, who would you want to see as your penalty taker?
Well, based on just them stats, you'd have to say Rashford, because the simple fact he hasn't missed, but then you've got to look at it as he hasn't taken as many as the other two. I do like the way Rashford takes penalties. I think the amount of power that he puts behind it, it is difficult for any keeper. I mean, the one in Paris, he just absolutely leathered it. There's no keeper that's stopping that. But he surely can do it differently as well, because I think the one he scored for England in the Nations League, that was a composed side foot penalty into the bottom corner. So I don't really care who takes the penalties, to be honest, out of them three. but as long as...
But if you were going to pick one...
I'd say Martial, because it's just my favourite player, so I'm just biased. But I'd like to say anyone can take a pen, anyone can miss a pen, but on the pitch there is one. There has to be one, and to a point, I agree with Ollie. Like I said, if someone's not feeling confident, then sound. But I don't agree with the system that they decide on the pitch that much, to be honest with you.
And I kind of agree with you, Ryan. That I know that Gary Neville seemed a bit over the top on the Monday night.
I think he admitted himself he brought it back in a bit after he realised the situation.
I think he was a bit over the top, but the principle still exists that I do feel there should be one set penalty taker. You shouldn't have to interchange all the time between two penalty takers. There should be one person who feels confident enough to step up for the team and take the penalty, as we've seen from loads of previous Manchester United sides. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when we get another penalty, potentially. If we get another penalty. So the final thing we're going to move on for the press conference. Ollie touched upon Romelu Lukaku's statements that he made in a podcast that Ollie said it was recorded before.
I didn't know that. I thought it was after.
Milan. But Ollie didn't really want to touch upon this. He says, I'm not going to dive into that one. That interview was made before the summer, wasn't it? When he was a Man United player. I would rather not. So he seems to be... He doesn't want to get involved because he knows if he gets drawn into these comments, then there could be almost a bit of beef, really.
Yeah, he doesn't strike me as that sort of person. But we've spoken on previous videos about Lukaku's conduct while he was still here towards the end, and like I said, then I had no idea that interview had taken place while he was still at United, which makes it 10 times worse anyway. I just think it's a bit childish, really, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, Lukaku's got his move, he's got what he wanted, he's left. It suited both parties. There's no need for it to still be dragging on now. Yeah. I mean, I think he almost subtly called out Martial as well. He's on about some of the French players taking pictures with the World Cup, and he's like, oh, you didn't even get picked for your team.
He shouted out Martial.
Yeah, it's just a bit petty, isn't it?
Yeah. So we're going to get to your comments because Romelu Lukaku, there's no need to talk about him that much. He's gone now. So Spliff Politics said, with Sanchez's potential departure, it looks like the club is paving way for the arrival of Jadon Sancho next season. Therefore, we cannot afford to miss out on Champions League football again. I mean, I love your optimism about Jadon Sancho, and obviously he's a fantastic player. He started the season off brilliantly for Borussia Dortmund. And he is the sort of player that kind of United fans want to see.
Yeah, definitely. He's definitely been already eyed up as the big one for next summer, but I think that a lot of that does depend on Champions League football. I don't think we can get too ahead of ourselves with... I mean, obviously, you'd like to think that the club are already looking at targets for next summer, already possibly January as well. Do you think we are? Yeah. I think we're looking at Sancho. I think... I can't remember his name, but a quite well-renowned journalist for the BBC.
Simon Stone?
No.
Film it naughty? Something like that.
He was on a podcast or a TalkSport or something like that, and he was saying that they'd identified Sancho, and Sancho was up for it, but obviously the lack of Champions League football was the only thing that was keeping the deal being done. Actually, I'm not entirely sure how accurate that is, but from the person who was saying it, you'd like to think that it was true. And... So I think a lot of our business does rest on if we can get back in the Champions League for next season.
Yes, definitely. And as we touched about, as Ryan's touched upon, Jadon Sancho would be a fantastic signing.
Imagine that as a front three. Martial, Rashford and Sancho.
Heaven. Orgasmic. Yeah. So, anyway, so Derek Chong says, any news that we're going to sign any free transfer players? So there's Fernando Llorente, which we touched upon earlier in the video. Ryan said he'd be good for a new strike option. I personally think as well he'd be good for a different option we have, because we've already seen that fluidity and that fast-paced striker that Ollie.
He scored some big goals for Tottenham as well. I mean, he got the one against
City, didn't he,
in the quarter-final? Yeah.
So he could potentially be a valuable addition to the squad, but obviously it remains to be seen whether that will happen. Patrick Ryan, when Omar looks into the camera, I feel as if he's looking into my soul. Thank you, Ryan. I mean, Patrick. Newton Heath says, rival fans have targeted Paul since he was back here. Cannot get at him directly, posed as fake United fans abused him racially. Thoughts on that?
I think just simply because of the price tag when he came, and his demeanour and his attitude. Not it's a bad attitude, but just the way he carries himself. He's a confident guy, and I think rival fans are always going to look to pick out your marquee player, your best player, anytime they slip up. And it's one of them, like, rival fans do give him a lot of stick. But I feel like if he was to go, people would be like, oh, well, you're screwed now. Yeah. Pogba's gone. Well, hang about. He said he was crap while he was here, so he can't be that bad. So, I think Pogba will. Just all he said there, it's only going to make him stronger. He doesn't seem like he's the type to get down about anything, really, does he? So I think he'll be fine and have a good season. Hopefully.
So, Digital to Silver, drop your PSN so I can beat you in FIFA, mate. I'll beat FIFA 24/7. You won't be able to beat me. So, quickly, before we wrap up, Crystal Palace coming up. Score predictions for that?
4-0. 4-0 FC's back.
Yeah, I think 4-0 FC's back. Make sure to like, share and subscribe and tune in for the next video, and we'll catch you guys very soon. See you in a bit.